Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I am here with...
I'm Gareth Hanrahan. I'm a writer and game designer.
And I'm Kenneth Hite. I'm a game designer and writer.
And today we're going to talk about Trails of Cthulhu, 2nd edition. Just to let our viewers know, I have not had the opportunity to play the 1st edition of Trail of Cthulhu, although every person I talk to about Cthulhu in general, Trail of Cthulhu always comes into conversation of how well those games are. So yes, let's start at the beginning. For those that hearing about this for the first time and never heard of Trail of Cthulhu, how would you explain this role-playing game exactly?
Okay, well, Trail of Cthulhu is based around the Gumshoe engine, which is Pelgrane Press's set of rules for investigation. The core idea of Gumshoe is that it's always more interesting for the players to get information. So there's no rolling to, you don't roll library use to find the right book. If there's a plot significant book in there and you have library use, you will find it. You don't roll to spot the telltale scratch or the vital clue hidden in the bushes. If the clue is going to move you on to the scenario, you will find it. You can still spend points to get extra information or extra benefits. There are still perils you've got to roll for, but the core idea is you'll never be stymied by the players not either failing a roll to notice something or not having a clear idea of what they should do next. They might not like what they want to do next. They might just go, oh, all our clues are pointing towards the scary cavern in the woods. We're scared to go there. But they always have a clear line of investigation to follow. We use Gumshoe in a whole bunch of settings. There's Trail, there's Let's Like Agents, which is Spies vs. Vampires. There's Use Terrorists, which is modern day horror. There's Sword and Sorcerer Team, which is this Venetian or quasi-Venetian fantasy. I'm missing loads of them, but Trail is what we're talking about. So do you want to describe the Trail variant, Ken?
And using Gumshoe, the goal is to investigate horror mysteries or occult mysteries or parascientific mysteries modeled after the works of H.P. Lovecraft and the Cthulhu mythos. So hence Cthulhu in the name. If someone is not familiar with H.P. Lovecraft, he is the most important writer in horror since Poe. And he's the guy who took horror from it's a mummy in a crypt to it's an alien from space. And everything about that changed horror and science fiction and fantasy is down to Lovecraft. Cthulhu, of course, is practically the bacon of gaming. He's the geek version of the fish decal that you put on your bumper sticker. He is representative of the impersonal apocalypse that will destroy us all. And as that apocalypse approaches, things start to go wrong. Cthulhu rises briefly and then subsides again in the story of the Call of Cthulhu. And these leave terrors and mysteries that you, as investigators, look into. And depending on what kind of campaign you're playing, your investigators may be from all different walks of life, or they may all be part of a criminal crew in Chicago, or they may be part of the faculty of Miskatonic University. Lots of different explanations, what we call campaign frames, that get you from your made-up investigator into the investigation without necessarily having to break down by explaining, why are you all in this basement? You have that already. And then within the character, you have a drive that says, why are you in the basement? Not why are all y'all in the basement, which is two different questions. But we answer them both.
What led to this process of making this into a 2nd edition game?
Part of it is that this has been the sort of flagship of the Gumshoe system from Pelgrane, and Pelgrane's non-fantasy flagship game itself, tentpole game, since 2008 when it came out. And that it was the 2nd or 3rd, depending on exactly how we count Fear itself, but the very early in the Gumshoe process in terms of design. And a lot of water has gone under the bridge since then. I personally have done 2 complete Gumshoe games and a bunch of mini Gumshoe games. Gar has done a bunch of 2nd editions of Gumshoe games and a bunch of big supplements for Gumshoe games. And there's been 16 years of player experience, and best practices have emerged on how to run Gumshoe and how to teach Gumshoe in a lot of senses. And all of that body of lore was getting farther and farther away from the 1st edition. And at some point, we needed to sort of make sure that that granddad gets a makeover and can play with the kids still. And I think that's the biggest reason to do it, is just that it was out so early that the process of design and play has sort of expanded out from it a little bit, and we need to sort of bring some of that back into the mother stream.
Yeah, I mean, the rules really haven't changed at all. It's been tweaked very, very slightly. All the updates pretty much have been in just terms of presentation, GM advice, how to structure things, how to basically run the game, as opposed to the actual numbers on the page.
Yeah, backwards compatibility was very important to us because, as you say, there's a lot of Trail of Cthulhu First Edition supplements out there, many of them award-winning, many of them very popular, and we don't want to make people have to start over and rebuy their collection. This is not like when D&D does a new edition and then suddenly none of your elves work. This is, like when Call of Cthulhu used to do a new edition and you'd say, oh, look at that, there's another paragraph under Migo. But also they would have, brought in and, tightened it up a little bit or done some other small shifts to make the game still part of the conversation going forward. And that was sort of our model and our goal there.
So just to be clear, the second edition sounds like cleaner version of the Gumshoe, the rule system?
It's not even a cleanup. It's just sort of, moving it so that it shows better. There's some cruft that was legacy code from first edition that we, changed to fit how Gumshoe games have gone going forward. But at the table, it's basically almost exactly the same experience. And it is, that was one of our big goals, was to make sure that it was backwards compatible.
What about the artwork and design of it? Was there any goals particularly that you want this new second edition to look like?
I mean, the artwork is mostly by Jerome, who's this fantastic artist. He did the cover again for the new edition. And I mean, he really, really, really nailed the tone from first edition. So it's going to like more artwork and shiny artwork. But I mean, the aesthetic has just been perfect from the start, right? So
we've switched to a 2-column layout, as you can see in the quick start, from the old 3-column, and we got sort of back and forth on the 3-column. I love 3-column because it looks text dense, like a work from the 1930s looks. Other people said this looks like a work from the 1930s. You're aware this is a whole new century. Many of us are reading this on our phones. What is your damage? And so I think we've sort of, over my querulous aging objections, have made it so that the kids today can read it better on their various screens.
So let me just showcase real fast some of the look of the Quick Start Guide, which I love the duotone green that's added to it. Definitely double column is a great addition to it. So for Trails of Cthulhu, I'm curious to know, what's your take on the mythos? What is in this? What's in Trails of Cthulhu that, as a fan of Cthulhu, a fan of Eldritch horror, can give me that maybe another system or another game may not?
Well, to start with, we try very hard to avoid having one take on the mythos, except that it is bad and needs to be, investigated and put down, stopped, blocked, banished, whatever you say. But Trail of Cthulhu, I designed very early to, first of all, support two styles of play. The purist style, where in sort of later Lovecraft stories, you encounter the mythos, have your entire world frame altered forcibly. Often you die or go insane, and that's the end of you. And that's the story, right? It's a man discovers the truth destroys the man. The other mode that we have, and these are modes that are supported by rules, specific rules you can turn on or turn off, as well as advice for how to play or how to run. The other mode is called the pulp mode, which is sort of the Robert E. Howard, I'm going to take you with me, Serpent Man type mode, two-fisted investigation with sort of more robust heroes who might think, yeah, shooting it is a great plan. Let's do that. And so you think, Robert E. Howard, you think Indiana Jones, you think sort of pulp adventure, which is why it's called the pulp mode. But the mythos itself, even in the first edition, I made sure to present not just different views of all the gods and titans, Azathoth, Nyarlathotep, Cthulhu, etc., but contradictory views of those gods, titans, etc. So you could play a purely Lovecraftian take. You could play a August Derleth take, where the god of fire hates the god of water, and they fight. You could play a sort of everything in the basket take. You could make the mythos whatever you want. It can be survivable if you turn all the pulp dials up. It can be ultimately toxic if you turn all the purist dials all the way up. What it represents is the truth of the outside, of the thing outside our parochial little world that will inevitably destroy us. That's the sort of common thread that the mythos is throughout everything. And so that's the only core that we kept, and that's the sort of effect on your stability and eventually your sanity from dealing with these horrific phenomena.
And I said we've worked on a ton of large campaigns together. We've both written more Cthulhu adventures than I can readily count, and basically all the advice experience is crammed into the book. It's basically how we did it, how we do it, is all boiled down there in the Putting It All Together chapter.
So in Trails of Cthulhu, who can you be exactly? Who can I play? And what is character creation like exactly?
I mean, you're playing an investigator. We have basically 20 sample occupations in there. In the second edition, we've simplified character creation. So basically, you pick your occupation. That gives you a number of sort of pre-allocated points to your investigative and general abilities. Investigative are basically the abilities you use to find clues. General are stuff like scuffling or athletics to overcome challenges and dangers. Running away. There's a fleeing ability, which is very useful to have, especially if you're a weedy academic. So you pick your occupation, pick your drive, allocate. You got a bunch of extra points to allocate, and the number of points depends on the number of players in the group. So if you've only got 2 players, they have lots of points to play with. You can basically cover all the skills between you. If you're a larger group, you get fewer points. You still cover all the skills between you, but just with more specialization. And then we have 3 sample campaign frames, which are basically sort of suggested campaign setups. You can either use one of those or roll your own. We've got advice for doing that. The 3 sample ones are the Armitage Inquiry, where basically you're playing Professor Miskatonic. That's sort of the most classically Lovecraftian one of them, because you are playing the basically the tiniest Lovecraft stories. You get letters from weird people up in the hills of Vermont and go, yes, I'll come and visit you, weird person who writes letters. And can you do the Chicago one, given it's your bailiwick?
Yeah, the sort of pulp campaign frame that we put in this time is Shadows Under Chicago, where based on textual clues in the novel The Case of Charles Dexter Ward by Lovecraft, we introduce the Cthulhu mythos into the gangland wars of the 1920s. Specifically, we initiate Al Capone into the mysteries of Yog-Sothoth. And you are either a team of criminals in Chicago, or a team of G-men trying to take down Capone, or a team of investigators like you might be in any other city, who suddenly notice that everything has gotten much worse and much weirder since Capone went to Philadelphia and came back. And why is the big question. And in many cases, you're fighting for your survival, possibly, if you're a rival gang that Capone wants to wipe out. If you're the G-men, you're doing the sort of Untouchables investigation, but with mythos investigation tied onto it. And if you're just Chicago investigators, you're just suddenly in a bigger, pulpier sort of a Sunnydale, except Sunnydale population 7 million by Lake Michigan, where every kind of monster and horror is suddenly popping off because Yog-Sothoth is blown past twice, and that's not good for anybody, not even for Chicago. And then Gar did a terrific purist setting that is kind of a departure for us in a lot of ways. And why don't you talk about under unknown skies, or under alien skies, or beneath alien skies. We're still working on
we should really
prepositions.
we should really pin down which keywords use the title.
What sort of skies they are. They are skies of some sort. We know this.
Yes. They're wide open skies because you're in rural Oklahoma in the 1930s. You're basically the upstanding townsfolk of this little town based in the middle of nowhere. And of late, this mysterious corporation from back east has set up this lab in the hills. No one's quite sure what they're doing up there or why they've chosen your town. But since they established themselves, there have been strange lights in the skies, strange rumblings underground. Your neighbours have been acting funny, and because this is your home, you're going to defend it, you're going to go out and find out what's going on. So basically, we wanted to get away from the sort of classic musty New England houses full of old books and tentacles rising out of the sea, and have something that felt a bit different and a bit fresher. The inspiration was The Mound is by Lovecraft and Heald, is it, or someone? Or?
Zelia Bishop.
Zelia Bishop, yeah. And basically, it is the elevator pitch is either there will be blood meets Stranger Things, or sort of like, Tales of the Loop meets Lovecraft. Basically, you're building a little small town and then have weirdness creep in from both around and below and above.
Yeah, it's sort of taking Lovecraft back to the science horror quality and away from the sort of occult horror that a lot of people associate him with. And that pure scientific vision is what made Lovecraft, so important and so powerful. And that's what Gar has captured with that campaign frame.
The first edition had two other campaign frames. There was Bookhounds of London and Project Covenant, both of which ended up basically becoming
their own books.
Their own books, yeah. Bookhounds became a full-fledged campaign, and Project Covenant was already our sort of homage to Delta Green, and we did the full Delta Green, and we just did a giant campaign for it as well, which is over there somewhere.
So before I want to ask you questions about the technical aspects of the book, about how big it is, the chapters within, what you're covering exactly. But before I do that, if I may pick your brains, just because I don't know when the next time I'll grab you two together again like this. I just want to talk a little bit about the mythos in general and how people see it nowadays. And one thing I find very interesting is that sometimes monsters in general tend to lose their luster, their fear factor in a sense. I remember Nightmare on Elm Street when I watched that was like horrifying when it first came out. Now it's Friday the 13th, Jason, same thing. It was horrifying the first 4 movies, and nowadays it doesn't work as well. But Cthulhu, I find interesting that even after all this time, it's not only is it been around and there's still media about it, but it still has a good hold on people's imaginations. It still has that watch out for this type of vibe. Why do you think that is? What is it about the Cthulhu mythos that is still, if anything, stronger than when it first appeared? Wow, maybe 100 years ago or so?
Almost 100, yeah. Lovecraft sort of sketched the plot of Call of Cthulhu out in his head in 1925, so it'll be 100 next year. He wrote it in 1926, so it'll be 100 again in 2026, and it was published in 1928, so it'll be 100 for the third and last time in 4 years from now. I think that what makes Cthulhu still, and Lovecraft saw the exact problem you talked about. He's full of comments that vampires and werewolves and ghosts are all played out. You can't do anything with them anymore. You need something new to represent modern mythology and modern terror. And his sort of genius was taking the old Gothic monsters and the old Gothic setup and transposing it into science fiction. And the reason that Cthulhu still resonates is that this was the myth that H.P. Lovecraft invented to, and myths, their job, whether it's the myth of Thor or the myth of Cthulhu, is to explain the world back to us. Why is there lightning? Because Thor. Why is why are we all going to be doomed no matter what we do? Because Cthulhu. And we have not changed our mind since 1925 about our doom. We still believe it will be enormous. It will be impersonal. We may deserve it in a sense. And Lovecraft, of course, has cults that go around and raise Cthulhu. And you can certainly say that people who are going around raising, if you're worried about global warming, people going around raising temperature are the same sorts of people as cults. But there's some apocalypse that is coming for us. And it might not be climate change. You might be worried about nuclear proliferation or nuclear terrorism. You might be worried about a giant epidemic that kills everybody. You might be worried about a gamma ray burster 80 light years away that we can't do anything about, that just goes off and sterilizes the solar system. But we know that our apocalypse is not going to come like in Revelation. It's not going to be, anything as pleasant as the Four Horsemen. It's going to be much more mysterious and much more unknowable and much more horrific because undeserved in our mind. And that's what Lovecraft is saying, is that no matter what you do, the end is coming for you, and it is not pleasant, and it was started before you were around, and it doesn't care. And that still resonates with people, because even though we are, well past 100 years of Darwin and Einstein and Shapley and Rutherford telling us we're not actually the pinnacle of God's creation, we're not actually the center of the universe, we still think we are in our little heads, right? And Lovecraft saying, nope, is very, very, it hits, right? It hits hard. And it hits harder than, don't sell a real estate to a guy from Romania. Well, okay, I won't. Problem solved. It's a different moral universe and a different sort of philosophical universe. And it's the one that we are in now, and we don't much like it, as witnessed the entire 21st century so far.
The other brilliant thing that Lovecraft does, especially in the Call of Cthulhu story, is he sort of presents Cthulhu as sort of hyper object. Because the Call of Cthulhu is basically like, it's like 4 different stories at one. You've got like this artist who glimpses one aspect of it. You've got these tribes of the swamp worshipping it, another aspect, and the police get that. You've got the sailors who encounter Cthulhu when really arises. None of them see the whole picture. It's only the reader, correlating the contents of the story that they get the full horror. It's the idea that the monsters and the horrors are so vast, complex, and omnipresent that basically you can't sort of pin them down. You've got to approach them from different angles and try and glimpse their nightmarish totality, which basically means you can encounter them anywhere, because any avenue of investigation will inevitably run into the mythos.
And of course, the irony is Lovecraft hated modernism in all its forms, but he wrote the ultimate modernist cubist horror that you have to approach from different angles to see all of. You can't tell one story because one story can't contain it. And that's the fundamental nature of modernism. So Lovecraft literally put his own most hated thing into Cthulhu, and that's why it still works, because Lovecraft hated a lot of stuff that we've moved beyond hating, hopefully, but he still didn't like that the world made no sense, and I don't think we still like that either.
When it comes to cosmic horror or eldritch horror, what's your favorite story? And I'm saying that in a way so that it doesn't have to be Lovecraft. Is there anything that really you go back to over and over again?
Well, I professionally go back to the whole mythos over and over again because that's my job. But some of the stories I don't like reading again as much as I do. The one that I fell in love/terror with when I was 11 years old, the first Lovecraft I ever read, turns out to have been his best story, The Color Out of Space. And that still works. That works in every form. That works just as a straight narrative. It works as a scientific explanation of cosmic horror. It works as a gothic. It works as an inverted gospel. It's just a fundamentally great piece of literature, and it also explains the Cthulhu mythos without ever saying any of the sort of magic words. It doesn't say Cthulhu or Necronomicon. Arkham is, physically where we're located, and the professors come out of Miskatonic. But other than that, There's none of the rest of Lovecraft's sort of maltheology in it. It's just a scientific expression of pure terror. And that story remains for me, the best example of cosmic horror that you could offer to anybody. And, other people differ, but the Color Out of Space is for me the pinnacle of it. And again, it is Lovecraft. You could make an argument that Clark Ashton Smith was a superior prose stylist. You could say that Algernon Blackwood could present the vastness of terror better than Lovecraft could. But none of them unified it with the modern and the inevitable the way that the Color Out of Space does and the way that Lovecraft does.
I really, really love Dreams of the Witch House. We're going to Lovecraft just purely for its sort of fever dream qualities. And the sort of weirdness parts of it mixed in with this very sort of old school sort of classic horror of witches and monsters and things in the walls. Other things, I'm really looking forward to Jeff Vandermeer's fourth Southern Reach book when that's out next month. Annihilation, he's saying it is not Lovecraftian, but it's like the Colour of Space. It's this unknowable thing flashing in, and he's sort of tapping into this eco anxiety and so forth, which is another aspect of the inevitable apocalypse.
Both of you have written many adventures dealing with Cthulhu and the Eldritch horror in general. Is there a certain story, something you've written that you go back to, so that if anyone wants to if I were to meet you at a convention and I asked you to play something from Trails of Cthulhu, what game would you pop out? What would be your go-to scenario?
The one that I sneaky enjoy the most is the Black Chateau, which is a scenario that I wrote relatively early, and it's in the collection Shadows Over Filmland. It's based vaguely on the Black House. It's based vaguely on the Black Cat, the Edgar Ulmer movie, and it's much more psychologically about destruction than directly, human level of cruelty and evil. It's more of a Robert. And if I'd written it, last year instead of in 2009 or 2010, it would be a Yellow King adventure. It wouldn't even be a Trail of Cthulhu adventure. In terms of the sort of the pure Lovecraft adventures, I'm pretty fond of Whitechapel Blackletter in Bookhounds of London, which is the sample adventure in that campaign where you're hunting for the magic book probably owned by Jack the Ripper in 1930s London and the sort of citywide cosmic consequences that are beginning to befall people who monkey around with it. I enjoyed that because it plays on, a lot of my great loves, book hoarding and true crime and the city of London in a way. So it's got a lot of sort of personal buttons of mine that I deliberately put in to push.
My go-to one for you must play this is not one I've written or even one Ken wrote, but Robin Lawes' Armitage Files, which is a staggeringly brilliant adventure idea. Basically, it's a campaign. It comes with these 10 handouts with these cryptic letters written by this increasingly deranged person, and you give them to the players, and the players basically follow interpret them, follow the clues, and then the GM improvises the adventure because the book also comes with a whole bunch of NPCs and locations and groups which are referenced in the letters, but the actual structure is discovered by the players. So basically, whatever the players go investigate, that's where the GM knows to build the campaign out. It's such a brilliant idea that we ended up stealing it, that whole concept for the Dracula dossier, which was our other massive project together. Mm-hmm. But it just came with the whole idea of an improvised campaign built around handouts the players read and interpret. So the players are the ones actually pushing the investigation, but the GM has loads of the tools to build the investigation ahead of the players and come up with challenges and perils and horrors and nightmarish explanations for the things they're investigating. It is just a brilliant, brilliant idea, and fascinating that given the role playing hobby is 30 plus years old, no one thought of doing it before that. It's just,
right.
as innovative as the hex troll or whatever.
So when the core rulebook comes out, how big will it be in your chapters? What topics are you covering? What can you tell us about that?
We don't actually have a final official page count yet. It'll be
It'll
longer
be bigger
than the first.
We know that.
Yeah,
it's already, I think, 30 pages longer, and we're not. We're doing our final editing pass right now, which in Pelgrane, when you edit, often you put things in instead of take them back out. So right now it's at what, 288, something like that.
About
it's
that.
Going to get longer.
Yeah,
so
it'll be somewhere in the region of 300 pages. I expect by the time it comes out, but don't hold me to that.
Right,
have been
and
certainly wrong. On
also, Art is going to blow those pages out as well, because we don't know when Jerome turns over the wonderful new art. Is it going to be full pagers? Is it going to be half? We don't have a sense of that. I mean, Kat probably does, but Gar and I certainly don't. Yeah. So we're assuming that it's probably, as Gar says, going to be around 300 pages. There's 8 chapters. One of those 8 is sort of the recommended reading, which is barely a chapter. So there's 7 chapters in the book. And that's character creation, the basic gumshoe rules, which I think is about 30 pages total.
Yeah, and
that's every real rule in the game is there. The 3rd chapter is the Cthulhu mythos, so that's the gods and titans, the monsters, the magic books and spells, and the evil cults that are lurking out there for you to mess with and be messed with by. Then
there's the 30s, which is
the world of the 30s, right? And
now
we turn it over to Gar for the chapters that he did.
So you got the 30s, which is from first edition and has not changed significantly because time is linear. Chapter 5 is the GMing chapter, put it all together. That's basically how to run the game, how to build adventures, how to build campaigns. We've added stuff on running one-shots because that's a different skill set and a different way of approaching the game. We've got lots of basically sort of crafting and building blocks in there. Then Chapter 6 is campaign frames. We've got 3 campaign frames in there. So you can basically grab one of those and set up your campaign that way. And then Chapter 7 is... Oh, go on.
Plus a full guide to building your own campaign frame if you are... Yeah. If you want to build something specifically for your table, we handhold you through that process.
Yep. And then Chapter 7 is 2 sample adventures. 1 pulp, 1 purist. We've got it's after that book, isn't it? Yes, it is. Which is the purest one, which is the sort of classic investigating a weird cult in a haunted house. And we've got Ken's Hammer of the Gods.
Yeah, Ken's and Gar's Hammer of the Gods. That's the pulp one, and this is where Kat said, "Make one where you chase Nazis and fight them." And so I said, "You got it." And so the Nazis, the occult Nazis that we all know and hate from Raiders of the Lost Ark and etc., are on the trail of a mystical artifact in the heart of Iceland, and you have to chase them with a red line across the map. And it turns out it's a very, very dangerous mystical artifact. As I said, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I did all the fun part, which is inventing the fun stuff, doing all the fun research, and finding the home movie of a walk across Iceland in the 1930s, and then sent it to Gar and said, "Now, Gar, make it publishable. Do all the hard, boring part of filling in all the stats and encounters and little boxes." And of course, Gar did his standard stellar job of taking my rough diamond and shining it up and cutting it and setting it in a ring so that anyone would wear it instead of hurl it to the ground in contempt. So that's our methodology, and I have to say it works. And then, like I say, Chapter 8 is just the recommended reading. Which, if you haven't read Lovecraft, which stories should you maybe start with? Who is August Derleth, and why do we make fun of him in our hearts? And that kind of thing. And so that's got Lovecraft, Howard and Derleth, other mythos authors, other horror authors, some mysteries from the period, and then some other media. So film, TV, podcasts, a website, comics, things the kids like today with their screens, as I mentioned previously.
Now, will this be in Kickstarter, or is this going to come straight from Pelgrane? Like, what's the plan for that so far?
We're crowdfunding it through BackerKit. It is supposed to go live. The revised date is the October 15th. So we run a campaign there for a month, I believe, and you can back it there, as you should, and it will be out in your friendly local game store sometime next year for the 100th anniversary of Cthulhu Mythos. But yes, BackerKit is the place to go for the Earth.
And specifically, there's a landing page for the game on BackerKit that's linked from the Pelgrane website. If you go to Pelgrane's website and look for Trail of Cthulhu 2nd, you can go to the BackerKit from there. Or if you have show notes, you can.
Yeah, there'll be a link down here somewhere.
Right. Yeah.
Are there any like stretch goals or anything like that in the BackerKit campaign?
There will be. What they are is not 100% confirmed yet.
Right. We're Gar and I are still in the stage of, but what if the book we secretly already wanted to write was a stretch goal? And then Kat is in the position of, don't be ridiculous. And so, I mean, there's going to be the sort of standard stretch goals that you get. There's going to be the opportunity to get a deluxe edition. There's going to be
the potential is stretch goal. Yeah.
The add-ons that are basic to most games. And then the specific stretch goals are still sort of in and around. There's a lot of monsters that don't fit in the book. We'll probably have me write another big PDF full of monsters. That'll be a stretch goal, I'll bet. But as of right now, we're still sort of nailing that down. But more stuff is the general stretch goal idea.
What are your plans so far for the line now? Are you thinking about, for the stuff that was published previously, you may go back and tweak it up, or are you planning to just do more adventure source books, very different ones in the future? What is the plan so far?
I mean, the earlier stuff doesn't require that much tweaking. I mean, there are none of the early campaign adventures needs, well, like some of the very early adventures need slight tweaks, but it's more like getting the numbers right as opposed to anything structural. So I think as Calvin goes along and does reprints, we'll do edited, updated versions. In terms of next in the line, we're still discussing that. We have an idea for a location book, and there will doubtless be adventures based around the various campaign frames that are in the core book.
Yeah, if you look at first edition, we wound up doing books of the campaign frames, so that's probable. Like Gar says, hinting at another big location book that will have an associated campaign frame with it. And it's one that I think we're both kind of excited to work on. I personally would love to see Gar's Oklahoma campaign frame get a book. And I obviously have wanted to write Gangland Mythos in Chicago since 2006, I think was the first time I ever proposed that to a publisher. So it'd be nice if that gets on the schedule. But a lot of it is, as Gar says, there's things that are first edition that are completely compatible, but they're out of print. So as we reprint them, they will have the tiny bits of scuffing done to make them fully 2E. Like every monster has a magic rating now that wasn't the case in original first edition. So it's that kind of level of tiny, changes. And again, it's changes to the stat block. If anything, it's not changes to how you play it at the table. Yeah.
Or so the early starters need a bit of formative restructuring. Like I've just finished doing a first pass on the scenario, the Kingsbury Horror, which was in the first edition. I've basically taken that and basically brought it up to how we're now presenting Gumshoe scenarios with basically the thing with Gumshoe scenarios is they're structured by scenes. So basically, GM knows the clear path through it. They know what's going to happen next, or where the players might go next. Actually, if you look at the quick start there's a scene flow diagram for little sample scenarios, so you know what scenes leads to what scenes, to know where you are in the scenario. So basically, I've taken the Kingsbury Horror, which was a somewhat tangled story, and explicated it and broken it up, so it now flows clearly for those who aren't Ken.
Yeah, it was a great scenario, but I don't think I would describe it as introductory at any stage. And it was just the scenario I wanted to write in 2008 and could do in a hurry. So that's why it wound up there. And then, but that's the sort of thing that Gar's talking about, is taking older scenarios and not really changing anything about them, just sort of changing their presentation so that they're in line with how people expect to run into Gumshoe now after another 9 games in the line or whatever it was.
Well, this sounds fantastic. Is there anything else about this book I haven't asked you about that you wanted to share?
No, I mean, for me, it's just been this weird sort of like, I have here the very, very, very first copy of first edition, which I bought as an eager fan back in 2007. So it was just really, really exciting to be able to, to work on the second edition and to sort of, keep capturing the wonder of that book in a new version.
Yeah, and for me, this was a labor of love back when I did it. When Simon Rogers, at that time publisher of Pelgrane and still co-publisher, asked me, would you like to adapt Call of Cthulhu to Gumshoe? I had to sort of, answer in 30 seconds so I didn't look too eager. And it was a joy to sort of try and represent that game that I grew up with in high school and college and after college and grad school, loving, as and turn it into Robin's terrific Gumshoe system. And then to sort of see it now standing on its own, it's moved out of the house. It's its own game now. That's been great. And of course, working with Gareth is just a nonstop delight for me as a designer, because Gareth is someone who thinks like me, but faster and better and younger. And so therefore that's, all to the good. I can give Gareth sort of mushy nonsense that no one would ever put up with, and then Gareth sort of says righto, takes it and comes back with what I would have written, but better and faster. And working with Gareth, plus with his own incredibly intense, incredibly well thought out ideas sort of dropped in, so that I'm looking at even my own stuff and I'm being surprised and amazed at how much better it is when Gareth touches it and represents it with his own. And he's been running Trail of Cthulhu, like he says, since it came out. He's run more Trail of Cthulhu than I have, probably by an order of magnitude, I'm sure. And
I've been running a trail game at the local convention, or I started as Call, but then moved to Trail in 2007 since 1997. So
yeah, so
as well as campaigns. But yeah,
so when you take the sort of the writing genius of Gar and then that level of experience with the game, you've got, a resource that you'd be an idiot not to just work to death. And so it's been a great joy to get to see my old stuff get newer and better under his ministrations.
I can't let that lengthy segment of praise go without some response. In every Pelgrane editing phase, there's like the Ken sprinkles magic dust section, where basically you just give Ken 2 or 3 days, he'll come in and he will just add these brilliant polishes and tweaks and phrases to pretty anything. But for Mythos, I mean, no one knows it better. So yeah, it's been wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, excellent. So I will put a link to the backer kit in the description below of this video and podcast. Thank you both very much for taking the time to talk to us about Trails of Cthulhu 2nd edition. And to our viewers, Thank you for watching. Stay safe out there. We'll see you next time.